Hellboy. Is it the comic that simply should not be adapted? The current offering of movies may have you believe, along with the critical and fan reception. In today's editorial, I will explore the Hellboy films, the cancelled trilogy, and of course, the brand new David Harbour iteration, along with whether Hellboy is simply a comic that should not have been adapted and was always doomed to fail. As always, if you did enjoy today's editorial, then please don't forget to show that enjoyment by hitting that like button, and if you're new here, subscribe for more of the very best editorials in the world of horror, sci-fi and pop culture. Side note, the aim of today's editorial is not to dissect Hellboy as a character, so for those who came here for that, apologies, but that is a different type of video. Today's main purpose is to explore the films themselves, what the creator, Mike Manola, has said about the adaptations, and the twisting narrative that has led us up to this current point where arguably Hellboy will now be retired from development for some time due to the monumentally bad reception and box office of the last iteration. Hellboy was released in 2004. Featuring Ron Perlman in the starring role along with John Hurt as his adopted father, Professor Broom. We also had the Del Toro favourite Doug Jones as Abe Sapien. Now back in 2004, as popular as Hellboy is amongst its fans, the wider populace was relatively unaware of who or what this character was. Del Toro and Mike Mignola had embarked on this journey with a production budget of $66 million and releasing the film through Sony Pictures. The film was a flop. Domestic gross was just under $60 million, not even covering its production budget, and the worldwide total wouldn't even crack $100 million, reaching only $99 million. The take home here is that the movie didn't make any profit at all. In fact, this would have been a huge loss for the studio. To explain how it made a loss, earning more than its production budget, we have to take a look at the total budget a film has for its release. $66 million is what it took to make the film, and that is only if the studio is being honest in revealing these numbers. There is, of course, also marketing to take into account. Advertising on TV, radio, buses, everywhere in public, events, etc. These things have a budget unto themselves, and the industry standard, the rule of thumb, is equal to the production budget. Which, yes, I know on face value it sounds insane, it sounds like nonsense, but you have to remember movies are featured and released all over the world. Ad spots are not cheap. Advertising on YouTube, for instance, can be incredibly costly, and the clicks soon roll in. Plastering Ron Perlman's face all over buses or billboards, again, these spaces are not cheap, and marketing usually begins 6 months prior to a film's release, so that is a very long time for these very expensive ad spots to be running. So looking at this, and knowing the industry rule of thumb, we can see that the movie, as a guesstimate, would have actually cost roughly $120 million, and that is being somewhat lenient with the figure. For the film to have broken even, it would have had to have taken $120 million plus. For the film to go into profit, you're looking at $150 million or so, and even then, that is a tiny profit for the studio. So taking this into account, the first film was a flop, hugely, a massive financial loss of over 20 to 30 million in fact. And as theatres still need to get paid and take their cut, distributors still have to get their cuts, and of course, producers, etc. From here, the future of Hellboy naturally was uncertain. So much to everyone's surprise, the sequel was greenlit, not by Sony though. This time, Hellboy, The Golden Army was released through Universal. The sequel and its director, writer, managed to secure an even greater production budget, somehow, and made the follow-up for a rumoured $85 million. By this point, the original had established its own fanbase, and comic book movies were growing, along with Del Toro's own presence, coming off of the back of Pan's Labyrinth, among other projects. The Golden Army took home a very sizable box office by comparison to the original movie, $160 million worldwide in fact. However, using the example earlier of industry standards and marketing budgets, we can see that this was still not considered profit, and is still considered not to be a success. Unfortunately, this movie was a financial failure, but of course less so than the first. Interestingly enough, around that time, it's important to look at what the creator of Hellboy was saying in interviews about the project, as it's a comparison that comes into play when discussing the latest movie and an interesting point of discussion. In an interview with IGN, Mike Mignola was asked how the second film was progressing as its production began, and he revealed the following. Let's see. Things are looking really, really good right now. We spent 2 months doing pre-production here in LA, and now we're kind of in between, and as soon as Guillermo finishes the Oscars, Pan's Labyrinth, directed by Del Toro, had been nominated for 6 Academy Awards, which is pretty damn cool. He'll be going to Budapest to set up production offices there. I believe that's still the plan. Things sometimes change day to day, and in the next month or so we'll have an office in Budapest. That's where the last stage of pre-production will happen, and we'll start filming probably in May. Now, as we can see from this statement, Mike was all for the second movie, singing its praises in fact. And then we come to the story itself, because again, these are really important when we look back at Mike's comments during the production of the latest iteration, and I believe it tells us whether Hellboy is a property that should be adapted or not. Mike Mignola stated, "It's an original story that Guillermo and I came up with about 2 years ago. It actually reflects the direction the comic is going in. Not in any way the same story, but it deals with similar things. The focus is more on the folklore and the fairy tale aspect of Hellboy. It's not Nazis, machines and mad scientists, but the old gods and characters who have been kind of shoved out of our world." Now, from here, the take home is that Mike and Del Toro worked on this story together. It was in fact their story. Now let's flash forward to the latest iteration. Hellboy with David Harbour, directed by Neil Marshall, was released on the 12th of April 2019, and as of recording this editorial, the 27th of April, the box office numbers are only showing up until the 24th of April. However, those figures show a measly domestic total of $21 million. This new Hellboy had a production budget of $50 million. Again, although we only have figures for the domestic total, even if we were to be generous and double the figure to account for the worldwide box office, which is being very generous, we can see how this movie still has not even come close to breaking even. This film can be considered a huge flop, a massive financial failure. But what happened? Why? It all comes down to the gatekeeper of the franchise, Mike Mignola. In February of 2017, Mike Mignola sat down to discuss the prospects of a third film with both Ron Perlman and Del Toro. From there, Del Toro took to Twitter to announce that Hellboy 3, sorry to report, spoke with all parties, must report that 100% the sequel will not happen, and that is to be the final thing about it. Hellboy may move in a different direction, heartbroken but not up to me. I, for one, wish everyone involved the best of luck. Now it's clear from these tweets that meeting between the three parties indicated Mike Mignola did not wish to pursue the final film in the trilogy from Del Toro. But why? When he, by his own admissions, was involved in writing the original story for the second film, which set up the third film. The true reason behind Mike Mignola not wishing to pursue it isn't clear. He wasn't financially impacted by the previous film's loss. Sure, he may not have seen a huge profit, but the financial hit would not have been his. Now, there are a few issues the latest film faced during its production. Ed Skrein being hired to play a mixed Asian heritage character caused a very small stir, but these are tiny and are only something those that follow the press outlets would have been aware of. This is not something that would have impacted the box office. I think the real issue here lies in that people are not aware of the Hellboy character, and those that are now aware are only aware because of Ron Perlman. The latest attempt was made to capitalise on the recent trends of R-rated adaptations, and this is really important. But when the character itself was popularised to the wider audience by utilising a very, very different tone, and then swapping that actor out and changing the tone, and expecting to reap profit, simply is terrible, terrible business. What an awful, awful and really dumb decision. Hellboy is a loved character, a property with great potential, but that potential has been squandered with bad decisions, the creator of the IP flip-flopping and mishandling his own creation. It's all led to the latest film, which by all accounts is rumoured to have had numerous on-set disputes between the director, producers and the cast, being a huge flop, and it shows. As much as I enjoyed the film, and I was entertained, from a technical aspect, it is choppy, jerky, with really bad editing and very janky dialogue. So I started this editorial by asking, is Hellboy the comic that simply should not be adapted? The numbers alone indicate the answer there, but to look deeper, you only have to take a look at the creator of the property to show that Mike Manola is the gatekeeper and ultimately making all of the final decisions on how it is handled. It's absolutely not something that should be adapted with him in charge. The vision just is not there. They should have absolutely went with Del Toro and Ron Perlman to finish the trilogy, and if they were smart now, they would fast track the third movie to capitalise on the disappointment people are feeling from this latest film. Again, as I said, this latest film was made to capitalise on an R-rated comic book trend. However, Hellboy is not known by essentially anyone, and it was only popularised by an entirely different tone. Anyway guys, if you do have any further thoughts, please do leave them down below in the comment section. If you enjoyed today's editorial, consider supporting me in my endeavours to create the best in deep dive content by pledging on Patreon. Links to that and my social medias are down below in the description box. As always, thank you so much for watching. I've been Mr. H. Take care.